Hey fellow sim racers, today we're going to do a little bit of a setup workshop. Got a race coming up with the league on Tuesday, and I just want to go through and show everyone the process that I use to get my setups made for each race. So without any further ado, I'm just going to go into it here. So we've picked the Aston Martin GT4 car, and we're going to be at Suzuka, one of my favorite tracks. So we're going to look at the weather. So we're going to set our average temperature here for 21 degrees, and we're just going to leave it as that. I don't want too much of the weather to change when it comes to affecting the setup. So let's go into it. So I find with Assetto Corsa Competizione, the aggressive setup is always going to be pretty fast. Now, drivers' abilities are going to vary greatly, but if you can get fast on the aggressive setup, then the tweaks that I'm going to do are just going to help the car be more comfortable once you're at the point where you're consistently running fast laps with the car. So let's check everything here. I like to drop the fuel down to about half of the fuel load, just so we have shorter races in the league, and I kind of like to start at that point. Another trick I like to do when I'm doing setups is I like to go into the options, and I like to make the HUD as large as possible. So in Assetto Corsa Competizione, 120% is the largest you can do. And you'll see I have my tires app enabled. I can disable the circuit map because I know the track very well, and I'm not racing, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to confirm it. And then, as you'll see, I have no setups for this car. So I'm going to pick the aggressive setup, and I'm just going to go out and get a baseline.
Green light, go, go, go.
So you always hear guys talking about driving in anger when they're on the racetrack. Well, before you can drive in anger, you have to drive in discovery. So that's basically what these next 5 laps are going to be about. It's going to be discovering what the car is capable of, what I can do with it on the track, and also get the tire pressures up to what the optimum is. Now, if you look at my tire overlay, you'll see right now that my tires are blue. That means that they're cold and they don't have a lot of grip. But what you especially want to pay attention to for the front tires is the bar in the middle needs to be even with the two rounded bars on the outside. So for the front tires, you want to look across the top of the tires, and for the rear tires, you want to look across the bottom of the tires. So the first couple of laps, it takes a little bit for the tires to get warm, but once they're warm, then I can start trying to lay down a little bit better lap times. I love Suzuka. It's one of my favorite tracks. Very technical sections with a lot of high speed sections as well. This back straight is awesome. You want to brake at the 100 board, gear down, turn in here. You don't want to get on the grass there as it'll make the car slide right out. I brake right about here. Okay, so this car is not bad on curbs. And onto the front straight. You want to brake right at this little road on the left hard. Oh, a bit wide there. So the car is lacking a little bit of cornering grip. This corner, you really want to be over to the right. And then a little on the curbing. You got to watch not to go too wide here. Halfway, I start braking. Turn in. You can take a little more of that curb. You could take a lot of this curb. You don't really want to go much wider than that on the exit of that corner. Pick up the throttle. Oh, a little wide there. Little lapse of attention. Okay. I'm seeing that my left rear tire is a lot more inflated than the rest of my tires. It's the one that's closest to being at optimum grip though. So now that I'm a little more comfortable with this car, let's put in a couple of angry laps. Okay, time to push. You want to brake right here. So it looks like I need to downshift for that last bit of that corner. I'll try that next lap. Tires are all over the board. So I always like to get at least 5 laps in to try the car out and see what it does. That'll give you a good idea of what your pressures are at. They'll be stabilized. So what I'm finding with the car is it feels like it has a lot of oversteer on corner exit under power. So that's one thing that we're going to look at in the setup to try to take away, or at least make it a little more manageable. Okay, let's see if I can put down a good lap here. A little bit of concentration. That was a bit better exit out of that corner. We're gaining time on the back straight. So if you'll notice on the tire overlay, none of the bars are even with the outer bars, the middle bars, either the front or the rear tires. So that's something that we're going to want to look at when we go back to tweak our setup. So I'll finish this lap off and I'll head into the pits. I love the sound of this car though. So yeah, the car has a little bit of a problem putting the power down on corner exit. So we're gonna have to try to take a bit of that away from it. Okay, let's go ahead and head into the pits and make some adjustments here. So we're gonna not want to stop in our pit box because what that'll do is it'll reset everything. So we're just gonna pull off here. We're gonna go back to the garage and let's take a look at our setup. So that's our current setup. Okay, that could be another reason why they were having a bit of problem. We're gonna put a little bit more traction control in and take a little bit of ABS out. So let's try the 2 and 2. Oh, we had a full fuel load too. I must have reset that. Okay, so our hot PSI is really low. And from what I was noticing, it looks like somewhere around 27.2 to 27.5 is what we'd be shooting for as far as the tire overlay. So we're just gonna put one click for every PSI we want to go up. So let's first do this one. So let's shoot for 27 for now. So we're going to put 1.2 PSI in the front left. And this one's going to need 1.3. This one's going to need 1 PSI. And this one's going to need 0.7. Okay, now, another thing I like to do is our league races are only 20 minutes long. So these brake pads too are more for endurance racing. They're good for about 4-hour races. I'm going to drop my front pads and my rear pads down to set 1, which is usually good for about an hour-long race. So let's look at everything here. I like a car that has a little bit more steering response, so I'm going to lower that down all the way. Now, another thing I noticed is the car was very oversteery on corner exit. Now, the diff preload, one really good way to take a bit of that away is just to lower it down one. So I'm going to do that, and then we're going to go back out on track and we're going to give it another go. We're going to do another 5 laps and see where we're at.
Low tire pressure. Stay clear of the curbs.
Let's see if we can improve our time a bit. What I want everyone to pay attention to is I want you to look at those middle bars on the tires once I've done 3 laps and tell me, and so that I can adjust according to that overlay. I want all of those tires basically when I hit the front straightaway to all be even in optimum range. So that means that I'm starting the next lap with optimum tire pressures and they're all even. I can already feel a bit of a difference with the diff preload change. The car is a little bit less squirrely on corner exit, even on cold tires. Usually your first 2 laps when you're testing, you don't really want to go more than 90% of your ability, right? You want the tires to get some heat in them before you push really hard. And right now we can kind of tell that the pressures are starting to look, even before they're hot, that they're starting to look a little more even. Okay, so this next lap we still have a bit cooler tires, but we're going to push about 95% this time. So what you'll notice now is my front left tire is at the optimum pressure because the bar is even across the top. The car still suffers with a little bit of on throttle oversteer out of the corner. But it has gained a little bit of turn in, which is nice. Okay, so the tire pressures are starting to look pretty good. I'm going to try and lay down a 99 to 100% lap here. Okay, so now on the front straight, I'm looking at my tire pressure. So it's looking like we still got to go up a little bit on 3 tires. The one that's at 27.4 is pretty close to optimum. It's still, the bar is still a bit short, and I might want to take it up 1 click. But we still got to do a couple more laps just to make sure. Oh, a little hot there. So as you see, the tires are coming up even more, and my left front is actually a tad high. So that's why you always want to do 5 laps, because you're still going to gain some temperature and pressure till you hit about a 5-lap range where the car is actually at its operating window. So let's try and lay down another fast lap here. So you'll see I was able to improve my time with just getting the tires closer to their optimum range, and one difference in the Diff Preload. Now, I'm finding that the Diff Preload actually helped my turn in, but it didn't really help me in the corner exit. So we're going to look at something different when we go back in the pits here. We're also going to tweak our tire pressures. Seems like our right side tires need to come up. Left sides are perfect right now. Okay, let's go ahead and head into the pits here. Okay, so let's look at our setup. So we're looking pretty good, like I said, on the left side. No, I'm going to leave the left side now. Now we're going to look at the rights. Now, everything's looking pretty good on that side, but I noticed on track that the tires seem to be a bit low for most of the track. So I'm going to try bumping them up each one. I'm also going to try setting the traction control one higher. So see if we can get a little bit less on power oversteer on corner exit. So let's look at that. We're also going to take one out of the anti-roll bar, and we're going to test that out on track and see if that improves our corner exit as well. So let's go back out again, try it out. Now we're at the point of fine tweaking the car.
Low tire pressure.
Our
Stay away
tire
from curbs.
pressures are close, and now it's just making the car feel the way that I want it to feel safe driving it on the limit. So always on the out lap, like I said, the tires are cold. You're not going to be a hero on this lap. So you just want to get the tires warm, get heat into the brakes. Second lap, you can pick it up a bit more, but you're still not going to be able to run 100%. Okay, let's put down an angry lap. Oh, a little bit wide there. So I've lost a little bit of front end grip on the car. So I think we're going to reverse that roll bar change. And we're going to look at other avenues to gain control of the back end. But let's complete our 5 laps and see where we're at with pressures as well. Okay, so this is our last lap. I will have to say that this car has nice controllable slides. Got a bad exit out of that corner. Again, on power oversteer. That was a better exit out of that corner. Okay, let's go into the pits. So I'm going to stop here. If you take a look at the tire overlay, you're going to notice that across the top, the bars are slightly shorter at the top edge of the tires than the outers. And then across the bottom, you're also going to notice that the bars are slightly shorter across the bottom edge of the tires, where it kind of fades from blue to green. So our tires still are not at the optimum pressure. So that's the one thing we're going to look at first off with the setup. So what I'm going to do is I was pretty happy with how even the tire pressures were. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the left side's up to zero point 0.2 psi, and I'm going to add zero point 0.3 on the right side because I want a little bit more heat in the right side tires. Now, I also noticed that our anti-roll bar change didn't really affect anything, so I'm going to put that back to 2. We're going to take a look at our aero. Now, another way to get some rear grip in the car is to lower the rear ride height. What that'll do, I have a lot of good turn in with the car, so I don't want to lose that. So I do want to gain a little bit more rear traction. So we're going to try lowering the ride height one. We don't want to fool around with the rear wing just yet. That's another option we can use, but Suzuka is a high-speed track, and the more wing you have, the more drag you create. Ride height is a little bit more beneficial because it doesn't create as much drag, but it will increase your rear grip the lower you can get the rear diffuser to the track. So let's try going down 1 on that. And let's look at everything again. Another option too, now I'm not a big fan of changing a whole bunch of things at once, but another option is we can also lower our rear bump. That's going to be our next thing that we look at. But we're not going to change that for now. We're going to go out and do another 5 laps. We're going to see if we've gotten things better or worse, and then we're going to adjust from there. Another thing that will affect corner exit on power is your caster angle. So the higher your caster values, the more it will induce oversteer on corner exit on throttle. So that's another option that we have. Now, another thing that you should look at when you're doing your setups is these are going to be your temperature readings, your outer, middle, and inner tire readings. So you don't want to be over on the front. You don't want to be over 6, maybe 7 difference. So you see here we're only 4. So that's pretty good. We've got maximum camber in. So that's optimum right there. Now let's look at the right side. So the right side here is also 4. So I mean, there's nothing to gain with any camber settings. Now the rears are they're looking really good also. They are at 3-degree difference. So that right rear tire looks excellent. Uh, Also, the left inner it looks excellent as well. There's a good temperature range across the tire. So I'm going to leave all that. We're going to go out, we're going to try it out and see if we've made any gains.
Low tire pressure, stay clear of the curbs.
Yeah, the car is very skaty on cold tires. So the goal that I'm trying to achieve when I'm making a setup for myself is I want a car that's a neutrally balanced so that I can do extraordinary things with it and not be worried that the car is going to react in an unpredictable way. So like you can see right now I'm sliding, but it's very neutral slide. It's easy to catch, easy to recover from. That's what I want to shoot for in my setup because the driver can overdrive the car and a setup will never help that. But if you do overdrive the car, you want a car that is forgiving. So right now you can see all my tire pressures are even. That's what I shoot for on the front straightaway. Oh, that curb shot me out. Now, a lot of professional drivers, aliens, they'll tell you that you should never be using the throttle, playing with it mid corner. But I find that that works for me because it's a good way to help to keep the car balanced and gripping when I need it to. Now, obviously, there's definitely a skill gap between the alien and professional drivers and just a regular average racer like me. But you have to find what works for you. Like people can tell you how to drive, but it's a good base, but you have to find your driving style. And once you do find your own driving style, when you can do consistent laps, that's when setup tweaking is going to help you. But until you can get to that point, you need to try to adapt to the car and learn its nuances. Okay, so our tires are looking pretty good here. Let's try to put a fast lap in, see if we can gain any time. So the car is feeling a little better. It wants to kick out less, which is good. That's what we're shooting for. Very controllable slide. So very close time to our fastest. Oh, that was my fault. Tried to get on the throttle a little too early. But it was easy to recover from that slide. And that's what I'm shooting for. I didn't go spinning off into the toolies. Okay, so my rear tires are looking pretty good. I need to come up a bit on my front tires. A lot of that also has to do with that sloppy lap that I just did, so. There, that curb helps the car rotate. A bit wide. Okay, so now I'm noticing that I've got a little bit too much pressure in my left side tires. But they are coming down nicely, so I think we're not going to touch those right now. Okay, so now the tires are a bit warmer. We're getting a better reading on our temperatures here. So we're at 5 here. So the trade-off with taking camber away is it's going to improve our braking, our straight line braking and our acceleration in a straight line, but it's going to lessen our mid-corner grip. So I don't really want to fool around with that because we're only 5 difference here and 5 difference here. We got 7 and we got 5. So this one actually, we can take a little camber out of it. So we're going to go ahead and do that. That'll cool this tire down a bit as well. So what we'll do is we'll add 1 psi or 0.1 psi. We're also going to add 0.1 psi on this side as well, or on the right rear, I should say. Now, I did notice with my driving style, now obviously I'm not a professional, I'm not an alien. I was making some mistakes out there on the track, but I did notice that this tire midway through the track was getting a bit warm. So I'm going to take this down 1.1 psi. Now, everything's good there. Everything's good there. I am going to, so I don't know if viewers have noticed that under the braking zone into turn 1, I'm getting a lot of braking oversteer, like turn in oversteer while braking. So what I want to do is I want to move my brake bias forward a bit. So I'm going to go 2 clicks on this and see if that helps that. And then, like I was saying about the rear shock absorbers, basically dampers, they're called. I'm gonna take one out of each one of the rear bumps. I'm gonna leave the rebound as is, and I'm just gonna soften the initial compression. That's what the bump is. It's it controls the compression of the rear spring. So I want it to be a little bit easier to compress, which will improve my rear traction on corner exit. We're going to leave all that and we're going to go back out and we're going to try it again.
Low tire pressure, stay away from curbs.
And again, as always, I know I keep repeating this, but your first 2 laps, you're not going to get that much out of the car because the tires are cold. So you got to keep that in the back of your mind and not try to overdrive the car. Now, I've seen a lot of videos online talking about GT4 tire pressures and how their optimal range is like 26.5 to 27. But what I'm finding on this track with this car is that it seems to be basically the optimal range is the 27.5 to 7.7 that the GT3 cars run. So I'm finding that interesting. If anybody wants to comment and tell me why they think that is, I appreciate any comments. For me, I don't really look at that as much as I do look at the bars on the tire overlay. When they're even, that basically is telling me that the tire is at its optimum pressure. That is usually the target that I look for when I'm doing my setups. I don't really pay that much attention to what people say as far as what they think that the optimum range is. Usually you can tell it by looking at the overlay. I can already feel that the damper, softening the rear damper, is making a difference with the car. And I overdrove that. I braked too late there. Yeah, big difference on corner exit there. A lot less tendency to want to kick the rear end of the car out. Looks like our brake bias change helped under braking for that corner as well. Yeah, the rear end of the car feels a lot more planted. Okay, the tire pressures are looking pretty good here. Let's try to get a little bit more time out of this lap. A little bit of a slide out of there, lost some time. There we go. That's a good drive out of that corner. A bit wide. Try to attack that too much. So, looking at my tire pressures, everything looks even across except for the front left. So, I think I'm going to put 0.2 of a PSI in the front left. And it looks like the rear damper was helping the car. So I think we're going to try taking one more away and see if we can't get the car just right. it's still got a little bit of on power oversteer out of the corner, but the car is very neutral feeling. It's easy to catch slides, and that's what you want from the setup. You want a neutral feeling car for your driving style, right? Yeah, see there, I was sliding, but it's very controllable. Okay, so let's go in. Let's make those changes. Okay, so back into setup. So we wanted to add a little bit to our front left. So I said 2.2. So let's do that. I'm liking this 27.6. So let's take a look at this one. Maybe we'll add one more to this as well. Now back to the dampers. We're going to, like I said, we're going to take one out and we're going to see how that feels. We're getting a lot closer with the car. Uh, One other option too that I failed to mention earlier was if you want to get a little bit of on power corner exit traction, you can increase your rear toe. What that does is it builds a little bit more heat in the tire and it helps under power to keep the rear from kicking out. So, but I'm going to leave that for now because when you do increase rear toe, you sacrifice straight line speed. You gain traction out of the corner, but you lose top end speed down the straight. So we're going to leave that alone because there's a couple of really good long straights here, and we don't really want to sacrifice any speed on the straightaway. So let's take this out and let's see if the damper change and the tire changes make a little bit better difference.
Low tire pressure. Stay clear of the curbs.
Whew. much better drive out of that corner. Okay, I'm really liking the way the tire pressures look right now. Very controllable slide there. Now I'm trying to drive the car as fast as I can with my ability. And I overdrove my ability there. The great thing is, though, is that with this setup, even though sometimes the driver is lacking, the car is very neutral and it's easy to catch and get back onto track so you don't lose too much time. I'm struggling whether or not to get into sixth here. But that damper change definitely made a difference as far as corner exit, which is helping me put this really good lap down right now. So there you have it. We have optimum tire pressures, and we just laid down the fastest lap of the session. I think I'm going to call it quits there, and I'm going to go back to the pits. I'm going to show you guys what the setup is, and that's going to be it for today. Yeah, the car is right where I like it. It's neutral. Uh, it's forgiving. I can drive it hard, and it's not going to punish me. I think that's all I can really ask for out of a setup. I'm gonna go and I'm gonna save this. I'll head back to the pits now. Yeah, very, very forgiving setup. This car loves curbs. Okay, so let's take a look at what we ended up with here. So we're gonna look at the track temp first. So this is where our track temp is. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna save this. Now, this is personal preference, but I always like to put down what the track temperature was. I also like to put what the air temperature was and what the setup is. So it's a race setup. And we're going to save that. Perfect. Okay, now let's take a look at it. So these are the settings that I ended up with. Tire pressures are 0.3 psi different between the left front and the right front, and 0.2 psi different between the left rear and the right rear. Now, let's take a look at the temperatures. So you'll notice here that I knocked the camber down one. Remember we were talking about camber. Um, it still looks to be a bit too much camber according to the temperatures. You can play with this camber, and what it'll do is it'll even out your temperatures across the tire, so you'll be able to pump this tire up, like for every bit of camber you take out, try to put 0.1 or 0.2 psi in to gain back your hot psi. So electronics, I found this was working the best for me. Traction control 3, ABS 2. Fuel and strategy, like I said, I like to practice and run races on pad set 1. Pad set 2 is for endurance racing. You want the tires to last, like they'll last up to 4 to 6 hours, maybe even longer. Pad set 3 is for wet conditions, a lot less braking force. They last forever. And pad set 4 is like they're for qualifying basically, but I don't even really use them for qualifying because it trains your muscle memory to brake in different places, which is detrimental to your race. So what I like to do is I like to leave them on brake pad 1. I don't normally get into any races longer than an hour, so I find that brake pad 1 gives me the best compromise between grip and wear. All right, so on the mechanical side, steering ratio is totally a personal preference. I like to turn less and have the car turn more, so I like mine set as low as possible. The brake bias, we adjusted that because under braking, the car had a tendency to want to over rotate, and I needed to take a bit of that away. So I added some brake bias in to the front. So what that does is it allows the rear tires not to lock up as soon, and it allows the car to kind of go more into an understeer situation. The Diff Preload, we knocked it down one from the aggressive setting, and that seemed to help my turn in. I also think it slightly helped the the off the corner on throttle oversteer. So I think that 30 for me, anyways, is the optimum setting. The dampers definitely helped on the corner exit oversteer. I might even knock these down to 11, but for now the 12 feels good. And you have to remember too, throughout the session, my driving also improved, so I was able to fight the tendency for the car to oversteer on corner exit, but this still did. I felt it help the car. Last but not least was the rear ride height. That also gave a bit of grip to the rear end of the car, and it took a slight bit of front steering away on turn in, but I compensated that with the other settings in the setup. So basically, that's it. Feel free to try it out and give me some feedback in the comments. Thank you.